Today, let's take a look at deploying PEM within a fully native Azure environment. Firstly, we'll deploy the PEM server as a VM from the Azure Marketplace. We'll then browse to the PEM application, where we'll set up a local admin password, upload a license for PEM, and install a certificate. Then back in Azure, we'll create an app registration, where we'll provide it with the API permissions it needs, as well as setting up the authentication ahead of time. We'll also upload a certificate to the app registration, as well as taking note of our tenant and client ID. Then we can move back to the PEM app and choose an admin group for our PEM server. Firstly, let's search for Osirium PEM in the Azure Marketplace. This version of PEM is version 3.1.0, so let's create a machine using that version. Firstly, let's choose a resource group to deploy the VM into. Next, let's give a name for the virtual machine. We'll use the standard recommended size for this VM, so 2 vCPUs and 8 GB of memory. Next, we'll attach a data disk for the PEM server to use. Here, we'll want to check that we're deploying the PEM server into the correct network, and then we can review and create the machine. Here, we'll want to download the generated SSH key pair in case you do want to access the PEM server over SSH in the future. Now we'll wait for the machine to deploy. At this stage, we'll browse to the PEM server and set a local admin password for the configuration of PEM. Once we've completed the configuration, you'll be logging in using your Azure credentials. At this point, we'll select Azure Active Directory as we'll be connecting to Azure Active Directory. Now we've logged into the PEM server, we can see the PEM configuration page. You'll see yellow tiles when you've got something to configure and grey tiles when they're not ready to configure yet. So firstly, let's upload the license. Once we've uploaded, we'll see that tile turn green and we can move on to the next one. And now we'll upload a TLS certificate so we have fully encrypted traffic between the PEM server and Azure AD. Now let's go back to our virtual machine in Azure. We'll be creating an app registration for PEM. So go to the app registrations page in Azure AD. Select New Registration and choose a name for your registered app. Firstly, we'll set up some API permissions for the app registration so that the PEM server can read all the information it needs from Azure AD. Firstly, go into Add a Permission, select Microsoft Graph, and we'll want to add permissions. We'll want to add application permissions for users read all, group read-all, and device read-all. Now select the Grant Admin Consent button for your organization. Next, we'll move on to authentication. So this is how we allow your PEM admins to log into the PEM interface using their Azure AD credentials, and your end users to authenticate with the PEM server to send logs and retrieve new policies. Go into Add a Platform, configure a single page application. Then you'll want to enter the login address for your PEM server. I'm using an IP address here, but you should use the address your PEM admins will use when browsing to the PEM server. Next, we'll go into Add a Platform again, and this time we'll select Mobile and Desktop Applications. You can copy and paste the format of the URI for this from our documentation. Here we can copy our client ID and paste it into the URI. Next, let's upload our certificate for the app registration as well. This should be the same certificate as you've uploaded to the PEM server. Now we're ready to go back to the PEM server interface and copy in our Azure tenant ID and our Azure client ID for the app registration. Now we can select an administrators group for the PEM server interface. This defines the group of users that's allowed to log in to the PEM server interface in order to make policies, respond to requests, and more. Finally, let's log out of the PEM local admin account and log in with our Azure AD credentials. And now you're all set up with PEM in Azure AD and ready to roll out the client to your end users. For more helpful information on using and administering PEM after deployment, please see further resources available in the description. If you'd like to know more, please get in touch.